This has become, well, we took a little time off, but it's become a special annual event in celebration of International Women's Day and Women's History Month. And so on behalf of all the women here, welcome, and we're glad you're here. And also to all the men, we're also really glad that you're here. It is all about diversity, so that's important. Aradna mentioned that I think the first event that she was moderating, that there were 2 men that came to the event. So we're making a lot of progress as we go forward. So we have a great group of people here alongside me on the panel. I want to thank them all for joining me today. And you are going to learn a lot about their backgrounds and career paths as they're going to share those with you. We're going to have some prepared remarks, and we're going to focus on 3 main areas: diversity, career, and leadership. And we'll have some questions for the panel, and then at the end of that, we would welcome your questions as well. So we'd love to hear what's on your mind. Let me go down the panel and introduce everyone, and then just by name, and then they're going to go ahead and introduce themselves. So at the far end, we have Heather Robertson-Fortner. She is partner and CEO of Signature FD. To my left, we have Sabrina Bowens-Richard. She is Vice President and Senior Investment Solutions Specialist, Diverse Asset Managers at Truist. And on my right, we have Kranzik, got that right, Senior Credit Analyst at Voya Investment Management. And then at the end, we have Susie Hennigy. She's Managing Director, and she gets the award for the longest title. Head of U.S. listed ETF Portfolio Engineering and Head of Atlanta Portfolio Engineering within BlackRock's ETF and Index Investment. So again, thank you guys all for being here with me, and thank you all for coming tonight. So let's start, Susie, we'll start down at your end and get started just by introducing yourself and just tell us a little about your career path. And also if you want to be candid about any challenges you may have come across as you progress in what is generally a male-dominated industry.
Absolutely. Cool. One of the challenges is the microphone. Does it not turn on?
I've got a green light.
There you go.
Okay, we're there. So microphones are a challenge. Memorizing my title also a challenge. A true story in the car right over here. I was asking my husband, he's over there, how shall I say my title because it's so long. It doesn't really sound like anything. But if you're familiar with iShares ETFs, I'm responsible for the group that actually manages all of those investments for you. I've been at BlackRock for about 13 years now, about 10 years in the portfolio management business. I'm very lucky, I'm in being candid, but I've had a lot of great female leaders in my particular business, so maybe different than what you'll hear from our other panelists, but I never really had that problem of not having a vision of what I could become. Like there was always a woman leader before me. So now I'm just kind of trying to pay that back, doing things like this, being a visible female leader for everyone.
Okay, my name is Kranzik, and I am the senior analyst doing TMT investment grade research at Voya. I've been there for 15 years now, and it's been a really interesting place to be where we've just grown assets under management, and also my responsibilities as far as what I cover has pretty much grown over the last 15 years. As far as challenges, Voya has, in the last 15 years, Voya has really gone on a path where there's been a lot of evolution. When I had joined there, it was a very male-dominated industry. It came down to one of the interview questions that was actually asked by 3 different people was, would your husband allow you to take this job? After getting the job, I kind of looked at him, you're not supposed to say that in an interview, please. So it has changed quite a bit, and it's making progress. I still think there's room for it to grow. Prior to that, I've been in a few other positions. I was at Moody's, which was actually very diverse and very supportive. It's a collegiate environment where I would honestly say about 40% of the women right through the organization, or 40% of the people through the organization were women. And then prior to that, I had the experience of working for a Japanese bank. And that was in the syndication department where I worked in a very small group that was very female dominated, but that was not enough. And when you get to a Japanese bank, those glass ceilings are a lot lower than you think they are. So it was a really interesting journey where I've worked in different places where the diversity or the environment has been very different. So, and I'm kind of happy to be here.
Great. Sabrina.
Yes. Hello again, my name is Sabrina Bowens-Richard. I head up the Diverse Asset Manager Solutions practice at Truist. And essentially what I do is I ensure that all of the investment solutions that we are adding to our platform are inclusive of firms who are managed or led by women, people of color, persons identifying as LGBTQ, veterans, and those with disabilities. So just widening the opportunity set for our clients and providing these diverse investment solutions for their portfolios. I started my career 25 years ago. I had a very different experience. When I first started on Wall Street, it was clear that there was a gender and racial gap. I did face microaggressions when like on day one, someone's like, "Oh, are you the new admin assistant?" And I'm like, "No, I'm an analyst." Graduated from college, traveled the world, here to start my career. And I had a number of instances like that, but as you all said, I was resilient. I pushed through. I had allies and support, and I'm here today.
I'm Heather Fortner. I am the CEO of Signature FD. We're a wealth management firm based in Midtown. Some friendly faces out in the crowd. I started my career, so I've been at Signature FD 19 years now. I started my career as an intern in this industry. So I worked my way through school. Wasn't really sure what in the world I wanted to do. Started with a firm while I was still in school. Interned with them. When I graduated, got a full-time job doing financial planning for them. Did that for about 2 years. Got really bored doing financial planning. Go figure. And they wanted at the time to start a trust company. So they asked, "Hey, would you like to go help figure out how to start a trust company?" I was like, "Sure, okay. Sounds like fun." Did that for about 2 years. Got bored again, and decided, I really kind of wanted to get back to the front side of client interaction and wealth management. Found Signature FD, started as a client service associate. Really just went back to, it was what was open and I knew I could do it. And from there, we were probably $250 million in management at that point, just very small firm. And had the opportunity to do a bunch of things, right? So we did mortgages, we did insurance, we did wealth management, we did financial planning. So all of those things, it was like, sure, I can do some of that. But in 2005, the SEC said, 2004, the SEC said, you gotta have a chief compliance officer, and nobody really wanted that job, so I did that. There aren't a whole lot of people that still want that job. But what that afforded me very early on in my career there was a seat at the board table, because you had to be in the room. Compliance had to be in the room. I wasn't necessarily voting, but you were in the room, right? You were in the room for conversations, and you were part of a larger conversation of driving the business forward. So from there, it was I kept the chief compliance officer role for 15 years until I was named CEO. It was a brilliant day. The day I was named CEO, I named someone else chief compliance officer. Literally in the same press release, if you look. The best day of my life. But that was a concurrent role to director of operations, which led to chief operating officer, which led to president, which led to CEO, which was the journey easy? No, of course not. Was there a lot of stuff along the way that probably should have never happened? Absolutely. Because there's still stuff that happens that probably shouldn't happen. Absolutely. But we're getting better, right? And I think the thing for me that always made the difference for me was I wanted it to be better for the people that came behind me. I didn't want the people that came behind me to have to fight the same fights, right? And so for me, it was just the matter of I'm strong enough, I'm resilient enough, I'm gonna fight this fight, I'm gonna stand here, and I'm probably gonna go down swinging, and it may be ugly along the way. And there were times that it was, right, pretty rough around the edges. I did saw some of those off. But at the end of the day, you know, I've got 2 little girls at home. And for me, part of my net worthwhile, what we call net worthwhile, is being able to create an environment and an industry where they won't have to face some of the same things that we faced together. So that's my journey.
Well, as you can tell, we have a lively group, and so I don't think we'll be bored with our conversation this evening. And in our prep call, we went on and on and on, so we may have to contain ourselves a little bit tonight as well, to stay on track and let you guys get into it. All right, so as I mentioned, the first topic we're going to talk about is really diversity. And historically, you know, the financial services industry has not been an industry that's focused on diversity, but clearly that is changing and has really, I think there's been some really significant changes in the last few years. But I want to ask our panelists to comment on that shift and what that's meant to your firm and your role, depending on what best suits you in terms of answering.
I can start on this one in the investment grade role that I'm looking at. As far as diversity, we recently came across something called ESG, and we came across it really hard. And with ESG though, it's kind of changed a few things what we're doing, and one of them is our investment process has changed. At this point now, ESG matters. Before I had not really cared much about the process, now we do. We're looking at growing mandates in that field, and what I found interesting about this is that when there's external pressure coming into companies to embrace diversity, and I've seen it with some of the companies that we've invested in and what we look at, but I've also seen it in the size of Voya, because when we're looking at investors investing in us, we have the same ESG questions to answer. So as far as diversity, I've seen a lot of momentum going in our company now with looking at what does our labor force look like, what does our board look like, but more, what does it look like underneath the board? And there's been a significant change, and I want to say this has just been the last year and a half, 2 years that we've seen these changes come on. But it's really kind of brought it into the forefront of what's happening at Voya right now.
Great. I totally agree with what you said. For what I started out with, that for me, I didn't face a lot of those hurdles. I became hyper aware in the past few years of all I didn't face them. We had a lot of women in our group. It was not diverse by any other metric. So it was really exciting for me to come to Atlanta 2 years ago to start a new business here, because one of our main mandates was to make sure our team looked like the city of Atlanta. So we became hyper aware of the demographics. We changed our hiring process, from the very beginning, how we posted our job descriptions, like looking through for bias that might scare away diverse candidates. We took it through our interns who happened to be diverse, and they gave us really great feedback of, you've listed all these words, a normal person out of college, outside the industry, they don't know what this means, and I like my job title. So, we did a lot to, make it sound like common sense and make it more attractive to people that we actually wanted to attract. So in the past year, in my sort of small group across Atlanta and San Francisco, in the past year, we've had 90% diversity, which is so different than it had looked historically, but 90% when it wasn't very diverse before, obviously still a lot of work to do. But I've been really proud and grateful to be part of the process of, okay, we have had really great stats for women, but we're changing the stats, across the whole board now.
Great.
So I guess about a year and a half ago, shortly after the George Floyd situation, our company realized the importance of diversity throughout the company, holistically, from a teammate standpoint, just trying to push people into leadership positions, but also from a client standpoint, which is kind of the genesis of how the role that I'm in came about, offering inclusive solutions. It was interesting because I was working at asset allocation, for the last 16 or so years, was happy with my job. I was on an advisory committee for this diverse asset manager practice, and everybody was kind of doing it part-time. They were doing their full-time jobs and dabbling into the diverse manager space, just making sure that we're intentional about it. And then senior management was like, this needs to be a dedicated practice. We need a dedicated, committed person to this. We don't want this to be a part-time situation. So I was actually interviewing people for that job. I was recommending people. I've got a candidate in here that I was recommending for that position. And then I realized that they actually wanted me to lean in and lead the charge. And again, I wasn't looking for a job, but I almost felt the importance of doing the work and that it would be industry changing and meaningful. And so that's why I did it. But I was interviewing other people.
I love that comment, lean in. I realized I had to lean in and do the work. I remember it was June 1st of 2020, and I was moving that day. Who moves in the middle of a global pandemic? I do. And we were surrounded, chaos of boxes, right? Literally movers coming in and out, and I got a text on my phone that said, you need to check your email. And I sat down on the stairs, and what had happened was that the racial injustice conversation that was happening in our city, right, in our backyard, had exploded at our office. And I recognized in that moment that I had a job to do, right? Not only did I have a job to do as the leader of a company, but there were people in my organization that were hurting, and they needed help, and they needed to be able to have conversations. And the honest truth is that it had not occurred to me to ask how they were doing up until that point. It had never even occurred to me, because I had the privilege, quite frankly, let's call it what it is, I had the privilege of not having to be a part of that conversation. I could watch it, and I could know what was going on in the world, and I could grieve it personally, and I could grieve it and think about it and talk about it in my own home, but I was now the leader of a firm, and I didn't have the privilege anymore of not having that conversation and not getting into the middle of that conversation and figuring out how we as a firm, not just me as Heather, but how we as a firm were going to address this issue, how we were going to talk about diversity, how we were going to talk about inclusion, what we were going to do. And I was getting enormous amounts of pressure from externally, internally, to say something, anything, right? And everyone had their own opinion of what I needed to say. And what I recognized in that moment was that there were a couple of things that I had going for me. One was the fact that I had a reverse mentor relationship with, she was the director of marketing at the time. She's now our chief marketing officer, but she's an African-American female. And she and I had a reverse mentor relationship for about a year, where we were able to I was able to ask important questions around race and how it was in the workplace and what was she experiencing and how could we be better. What did I not understand? What did I not know? Having that relationship available to me, a safe place, because not everybody had a safe place to be able to have those conversations and ask real questions about that. That was one thing, but the other thing was that we made the commitment, we weren't just going to say something, we were going to have a coordinated plan that we were gonna be able to drive back to a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because it is one thing to say something at the front, and it is a whole other thing to do something. So we have done a lot of things that I'm proud of. We've got a long way to go, but as the leader of the firm, understanding that not everybody in the organization is going to believe the same things that you do. Not everybody in the organization is going to understand it. But my job, our job, is to have an action plan. It's to create safe spaces for people to have those conversations. It's bringing in education so that people can learn and have an opportunity to see perspectives and hear things that they might not otherwise hear. And it's our job to just keep coming back to it time and time and time again, because that's how you make real change.
Okay. I have a list of questions in front of me, but my brain is kind of going all over the place, and wow, I have a lot of other things to ask as it relates to that, to everyone. But to try to get that to a more central point, I'm wondering if you guys can comment on, you know, obviously this shift in focus on diversity has really come to light in the last few years and across many different ways. And so I think it might be helpful for everyone to hear some of the initiatives that have been successful that you've put in place, and maybe some that haven't worked as well, kind of what you've learned from that, and then what you see. I mean, everybody's kind of alluded to it, but where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, that's kind of long term, but I'm kind of curious because I know from, you know, people are thinking about that from a strategic standpoint. How are you positioning today for what, you know, is coming down the pipe?
Okay, as far as what I've seen from where I sit at Voya, because I'm not sitting in the boardroom, I see Voya getting very active in diversity in at least 3 different places. The first place we're seeing is in the hiring. And right now we are actively out looking for diverse candidates. I can tell you that when I the first 10 years that I was at Voya, whenever we meet a new position, the whole team interviews the person. In that 10-year period, I interviewed 1 woman, and we gave her the job. In the last year right now, we're looking to hire people, and I would say that I've talked to 3 women so far. So there's been a significant movement in what we're doing as far as recruiting. And it's happening both on the entry level. Voya has engaged with 3 different universities where we're doing mentoring programs, where we're approaching people in their senior year of college. They will do a split internship at Voya and at their college, and then when they come in, they're assigned mentors, and I believe they are assigned 4 different mentors. We're also changing a little bit on how we hire in the mid-level, that we've started to use some outside recruiting. As far as on the street when people get jobs, the way it had been is that you get your candidates by word of mouth. So we would go out to our salespeople, say, we're looking, who do you know? And their salespeople would send us candidates, but the candidates looked a lot like our salespeople. So it really didn't get you very far. So now we're using external consultants to try to source more diverse candidates. The other thing that I'm seeing with Voya is we have employee resource groups, and they've really energized these groups. Before, go back again 10 years, I can give you the stories of what it was. The women's group, we exchanged recipes for our Christmas party. They brought in a financial planner who started asking our woman who was working on a securitization desk, do you know what a bond is? Okay. They've really stepped it up at this point. We got to the point now where, like, before COVID was one of our last in-person meetings, I suggested the topic of annuities. I didn't know a lot about them. I wanted to know. We filled up the room. Everybody wanted to know what it was. So there's a lot of emphasis on the employee research group. Then the last thing that Voya is doing, and this is happening well above me in my pay grade, they are starting to invest in the community. And I just looked at my website right before I came here, and on February 24th, they announced that they were launching a new grant program. Sorry. that, you know, they were awarding $10,000 grants to Black-owned technology-based businesses. They also have a CEO for Commissioner for Disability Employment. That's been a big push at Voya. Well, I know that one of the things we were involved with was the Cristo Ray, if you all know about the high school here. And I've seen the interns kind of, again, pre-COVID, but we were bringing in interns. So, you know, from that perspective, the investing in the community kind of was showing some of the real dedication that the company has as far as diversity.
I'm nowhere near as prepared as my neighbor, so I can't. I should have sat over. But you know, I think it's a very common thing in the industry right now. So a lot of focus on hiring, which I've been really excited to be a part of. The employee resource groups. But I kind of want to skip over to maybe some of the challenges where we did put so much focus into these things, and where I'm now seeing the shift is, great, we got these people in the door, but have we really embraced them? Like, are we hearing what they're saying? Are we being truly inclusive? And what can we do to further that? Like, we all have these really great intentions, but I'm sure that doesn't help the person sitting next to me if they feel ignored. So I'm seeing a shift in that through a couple of different programs. One I'm excited about called Propel, like all the BlackRock things. It's an acronym, and I can't tell you what it stands for. But this was the first program I saw where instead of just telling the diverse person, oh, here's how you behave to fit in with all of the other people, it actually took their coworkers and their managers and said, here's how you can be more understanding of your diverse coworker. Here's how you can be an ally to them. Like, so meeting in the middle instead of, you know, I don't know if you all experience this as women coming up. Like, you know, I have a lot of the mentoring of, well, make sure you're big in your seat, and, you know, don't have exclamation points. And I'm happy that we're not saying these things to our diverse candidates, but we're saying, hey, maybe you take a minute and think about how you're interacting and how you're impacting that person. So I'm really excited to see how that changes our workplace. And then because it has been, you know, truly a really big emphasis on junior people, I'm really excited to see the future of when these junior diverse colleagues, they become leaders, and how that really transforms it.
And I would echo a lot of what everyone has said. I mean, our company has had a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for probably just under 10 years. But I think what's different now is that the company is really putting its money where its mouth is, and we're starting to commit resources around efforts. You know, similar to Voya, we invested about $80 million in startup businesses that are run by diverse candidates. We're partnering with HBCUs. We have an entity called Truist Ventures that's also helping to seed diverse firms, and then my role obviously was built around inclusivity for our clients. I would say the challenge over the next 5 to 10 years is the face of wealth is actually changing. So you're going to see more women, more people of color amass wealth at an increasing rate, and companies just need to be able to have advisors or financial experts who can really meet the changing needs of what the face of wealth will look like. So I think, you know, many companies are still trying to get in front of that.
I completely agree with everything they've said. One of the things that we've done internally is we created a DE&I task force, and it's just voluntary. Whoever wants to be a part of it is a part of it. And the conversations that they're having, it's basically like an advisory board to me, quite frankly. I don't go to the meetings, but they are having conversations specifically around, you know, what's happening in the workplace, how they feel about what's happening in the workplace, what we can do as an organization to drive these efforts forward, what they would like to see measured. If they've come from other firms, what they've seen other firms do that has worked. They have really championed our effort to lean into. We had some young ladies in the office yesterday from Agnes Scott who are in the office for 3 days, just learning about our industry, learning what we do. asking questions about how do you develop a career, how do you do those things. So just creating the space for that and giving, quite frankly, our team an opportunity to lean into that where they potentially didn't know how to lean into that before, but then also reaping enormous rewards from that as an organization and as a human. And then, truly, I do think the face of wealth is changing, right? And over the next 5 to 10 years, if you can't, as an organization, look like the community that you're serving, I love that, Susan, what y'all did. You're gonna struggle to compete, I think.
Okay.
Wow. A lot of good comments there, and I feel like we could talk about just diversity the whole night, but we're going to move on to the next topic so we can stay on time and talk a little bit more as it relates to career. And one of the things we talked about in our planning call was sort of how work-life balance has really changed in terms of the definition of that as we've gone through COVID, and how in many cases, COVID had put a lot more responsibility on female professionals just by the nature of their children being at home and doing virtual activities. So additionally, organizations are also being asked to do more to support their employees as they go through this transition of what's sort of been a survival mode to what we call a thriving mode, or at least we hope it is as we come out of the pandemic. So I'm wondering if you guys can comment on work-life balance and what it really means today, given the new sort of environment we're in, hybrid. I know a lot of people have just gone back to the office, so that's probably a big topic and getting a lot of comment in the office. And how do you think that's going to evolve at your firms?
I don't really have a good answer to this, but I will go first anyway. I hadn't really figured this out, and I'm not sure I will ever get there, but the one thing I have figured out is that I'm the one doing it to myself a lot. My expectation for what I am trying to do is so much higher than everyone around me. So the way I have gotten just the slightest bit of relief over the past few years is actually realizing what the expectation of me is. Like, it's okay to say no occasionally, it's okay to do this to 80% of the job, and it's surely okay to be delegating. But I'm gonna be quiet now and hopefully get good advice on how to achieve this.
Well, as far as work-life balance, prior to COVID, I had worked really hard to compartmentalize. I had work and I had home, and they didn't cross. To an extent that if I had to do work on the weekend, I would go in the office and do it. I did not bring it into my house. The only place I really kind of messed it up was I did keep my family's calendar on my work calendar because it was in front of me. But once COVID happened, all of a sudden, those two parts of your life come colliding together, and they're both demanding attention, and they're demanding reworking how everything is done. Whether it be from how the fundamental process is going to how do I manage my 10-year-old who is on a Zoom call and lying on the floor staring at the ceiling. At the same time, it was kind of crazy, but what I did find through the process, and I think this kind of holds, is that there were intersections that worked well. For example, there are parts of my job that I could easily do while I'm driving to carpool and coming back. And it makes it a lot easier. And I mean, everybody had some flexibility. As far as the washing machine repairman's coming, I don't care, I'm gonna be in my living room all day, come whenever you want. But when I was thinking about the work-life balance, and I did kind of go and I asked the guys on my desk, it was kind of fun doing that, saying, guys, what does it mean to you now? And it was interesting what I heard from them, is that they said that, now that we've been working at home, we've seen a lot of flexibility, and we want that. So all of a sudden, right now, the shift had happened, and I think that that's really going to empower work-life balance going forward, because before it had always been, this is the mother's issue. And now we're saying, this is the family's issue. When our head of desk is doing his morning Zoom call as he's driving his kids to school, I'm like, this is good stuff. that continuing. So, I don't think work-life balance or the involvement of the whole family, like certain trends happen on a pendulum. And you think about like the political environment. We go conservative, we go liberal, we go back conservative. But I don't think work-life balance is doing that. I think we're in a one-way direction, and the issue is how fast do we move there? And that's my take.
Well, I would say I've always struggled with work-life balance. It seems like my career was always accelerating at a time when my family life just became more challenging. And I always thought I was doing a great job at the work from home, kids learning virtually, until my 9-year-old daughter had grabbed my phone and did a video. It was a two-person video. She played both people, but she played me. She played me with a suit on at my desk, and she played herself as a kid begging for my attention. And she spliced this together. So she has the suit on, and she's like, and so the kid version of her is coming to me saying, Mom, I need this. And the adult suited version of me is like, and that really that caught my attention. It made me look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm not doing such a great job. I need to certainly separate work and home life. I thought I was doing okay. She was getting good grades. I mean, things seemed like they were working. I was productive at work. But she showed me, you're not paying attention to me. So we fixed that. So I definitely, separate home and work life. We spend more time together. Whenever she'd have a break, we take a walk together. I mean, it's just made me more aware, I think, more intentional about spending time, and I appreciate that. So it was a slap in the face, but it worked.
I was impressed with her skills.
She's very good. She's an actress too. She's an actress, so she played both parts very well. No, she's really a paid actress.
I don't know that I've ever, balance is not really a word I do well, ever, in anything. I've always thought about it more as an integration, right? And I think about my life in seasons. I like to think about, the seasons of life, and that nothing really lasts for longer than a season. I was a hot mess getting here. I've got an 8-week-old baby and a 5-year-old. My husband's traveling. It took my mom, my sister, and my niece all over the house, trying to get it all together tonight to get here. I'm surprised there's not puke on my shoulder. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's balance. I don't know if that's integration. I don't know if that's survival. I don't know what it is, but it works, right? And so I do think that during this time frame, I think what I learned, Susie, I thought your comments were very appropriate, which is we're the hardest on ourselves. Because we want to be perfect at everything, and you're just never going to be perfect at everything. And one of our core values at Signature FD is grace. And we talked a lot about giving other people grace, but then I needed to turn around and look and say, are you giving it to yourself, right? Are you extending the same grace to yourself? And a lot of times we don't. And so I think this concept of work-life balance is overrated. I think it's going to be seasons of your life, and you do what you need to do in those seasons of your life. And you extend other people and yourself a lot of grace, and be present, right? In the moments that you can, and in the moments that you have, be intentional and be present. And those are the things that the people around you will remember.
Great answers.
This is a delay.
Okay, I finally figured it out. Okay, I'm gonna ask you two guys one of these questions and you two guys the other question. Because I think you guys touched on this from a firm standpoint, but I'm curious, as your firms are sort of putting in these return to work policies, what is the flexibility looking like? And are they taking feedback from the employees? And Corinne, to your point, people want that flexibility and they don't want to go back. So what's the response sort of from you guys are both from two large corporations, how is that being handled in your environment?
Voya's parent company, because we're Voya Investment Management, or at least that's where I'm at. Voya, the parent company, Voya Financial, would probably be happy if it had 100% remote workforce. Okay. Then you come down to investment management, where our managers want us in the office. So there was a conflict that was going on as far as what was coming down from on top and what everybody else, as far as the investment management pressure coming in. So what we've done, and I think what has happened is that the overall policy has kind of impacted where we came out from investment management. So right now, what we're looking at is we're looking at a hybrid work schedule, at least for the most part, and I hope I'm not announcing anything here that's not official. As far as our team is concerned, we kind of came into the office. There was a soft invite back in November, and it was voluntary, and nobody but me on the team took it. I came in because I needed a quiet place to work at least 1 day. But so what happened is we had come back, and we kind of amongst ourselves decided that a 2-day back would be more appropriate than 3, although we'll probably move to 3 if the pressure comes down to do that. On the first day back, they kind of looked at the team, and there are 2 guys who live way farther north in Milton, and about 3 o'clock they said, why don't you guys beat traffic and head on home? Log back in when you get there. So I think that the flexibility is going to be there, but it's still early days right now. So just today back in the office was the busiest day we've seen yet. And will be interesting to see as it evolves. But right now, it's kind of a dichotomy of, you've got the pressure from on top of saying we want to be flexible, and then you have the managers in investment management saying we need to see our people for, to basically cross-pollinate investment ideas, and we need to be talking to each other across the desk. So they're working on balancing that right now. And I don't know where that's going to come out, but I'm kind of hoping for 2 days in the office.
So we're somewhat similar. We definitely have the issue of very divergent views. There are people who want to be home, but I would say our senior leadership wants us all there all the time. So we landed on the other side of the middle with 3 in the office and 2 flexible. But it's a pilot, so I fear it might work its way back to 5 days a week. But at least for now, this feels like more flexibility than I ever had throughout my career. So I'm going to enjoy it while I can. We are trying to make it a little fun, as I'm sure everybody is. We're doing a breakfast, we're doing different events. I don't know, people are cheap dates. You give me a breakfast, I'm not really that excited, but if you tell me my boss is going to yell at me for not going, I'll be there. This was our first week back in the office here in Atlanta. So a lot of adjustment period, a lot of things I was saying out loud, not realizing, oh, I have neighbors again. One of my colleagues over here, I asked her if she could please remind me if I was saying anything weird or awkward. She's giving me the look right now that I'm doing that, so
All right, well, and I'm sure you all are experiencing a wide variety of sort of hybrid return to work, but hopefully the flexibility aspect is here to stay for everyone, because it's obviously greatly appreciated and beneficial in everybody's world, makes your life so much easier. I wanted to ask you guys a question about something that we talked about on our call, and you guys kind of both sort of alluded to it, but when we were having our prep call, we talked about women feeling a guilt. And I probably shouldn't just say women, men probably feel guilty too, but I think women oftentimes feel a guilt that when you're at work, you're thinking about home, and when you're at home, you're thinking about work. And you both alluded to that in different ways, but I wonder if you could just comment a little bit further on that and how you guys have sort of handled that in your careers.
Okay. My situation was really unique and extreme, but I'm grateful that I was working and still am working for a supportive company. So, personal story, my youngest daughter was born with a genetic disorder, and so she wasn't expected to live. So, through birth. So while I'm on maternity leave, we're like, in the ICU, and stressed out, and the company was super supportive. But I came off of maternity leave with her still in the ICU and under hospice care. Company extremely supportive, a ton of resources. They provided a in-home nurse, provided extra days for me to take her to doctor's appointments. So I think the importance of when you're dealing with work-life balance and trying to figure it all out, if you have a company that's got policies and practices in place that are supportive, it makes all the difference. She's still here, she's doing well, she'll be 8. And I mentioned this before, at the same time, my career is just accelerating, and the company's just been just a champion around the work. And then actually, she was the ambassador baby for the March of Dimes, and a few years ago, we've got some supporters here today, and the company donated a ton of money to her campaign. So kudos to SunTrust Truist for just being so supportive.
I think, when we talked about it on our call, I think for me, I've watched a lot of women over their careers allow guilt, and I don't want to say just women, I think men experience it as well, but allow the guilt of dividing their attention between home and work. Or it could be elder parents, or whatever, the caregiving role really crushed them, really crushed their joy, quite frankly, not being able to find a joy in anything that they're doing because they're carrying guilt over maybe not enough time, not enough energy, not enough effort, not enough this. Someone asked me yesterday when I was meeting with the young ladies from Agnes Scott, what do you think, I think the question was something like, what do you think is the biggest barrier to female leadership in the industry or something like that? And my answer was really, quite frankly, I think potentially us. Like sometimes we get in our own heads so much that we don't have really kind of that voice of reason, that personal advisory board of people who you trust without fail, who are speaking truth to you. And I think that's probably for me been the most influential thing, because I am the person that, I can function with 4 hours of sleep, and you need more than that. It's just kind of gravy, and well, if you can do it, you might as well do it and just keep moving until you just die. I mean, you just collapse, and then you rest for a couple of days, and then you pick yourself up and you do it again. And it's like, why do that? Why do that? And having that personal board, right? So, quite frankly, January was really hard. I had a baby on December 31st. January, I'm literally not sleeping. I'm the CEO of a company. I'm all in my head about the fact that I'm not there, right? I'm reliant on a team of leaders. There's stuff happening. I was all up in my head. What I had in that moment was a history of, I have put in place around me 2 external coaches that I pay to tell me the truth. I don't want to listen to people that might have an agenda. I don't want to listen to people who might want to get something from me. I want to listen to people who can tell me the truth. And so in those moments where, I just really wasn't sure, and I was in my head, and I was scared and thinking about, those are the calls you make, right? And so I think that not a lot of women do that for themselves. Not a lot of people do that for themselves. Surround themselves with a board of people that they can trust to speak truth in love, not truth in hate, but truth in love to them, that will help you overcome those negative voices in your head when they start. And I do have to say, I have to qualify all this. So my undergrad's in finance, my master's is in professional counseling. Okay, so a lot of this stuff, like, it's schooled.
You come by it naturally. Okay, well, I think we're going to close on the career topic there. I know we're getting a little tight on time, and the last thing we wanted to touch on was leadership and women in leadership. And in order to save a little time, we had 4 questions, and I'm going to line them up for each of you as we go down the path. But as we've gone through this DE&I progression, and even just as things have evolved, certainly women have taken on much greater opportunities in leadership positions. And with that comes challenges and additional responsibilities. And oftentimes women are put forth as role models and asked to sort of support and bring other women along. So there's more to it than just the role. So I'm going to ask each of you one of the questions related to that topic. So Corinne, I'm going to start with you. How do you incorporate those additional challenges in your current role?
In my current role right now, and I don't have, I don't have any direct reports right now. But one of the leadership roles is that we've started to look for junior people, and I normally just kind of sit back on the hiring process, but this time I did not. This time I kind of stepped up and said, we really need good candidates. So I've been out working really hard to do that. The other roles that I've had as far as leadership has just been a lot more informal and kind of coaching around with, or coaching some of the other junior women in the team, or some of my peers, just to support here or there. But as far as others, I'm sorry, I got 10 minutes, make sure I got everything. Yeah, we're good. Sorry, I am an analyst by trade, so I do have notes. I don't go anywhere without them. But and as far as, and that pretty much, that's pretty much about what I have to say on that.
Susie, you alluded to this when we were talking about career, that women are often more critical of themselves than others. One of the questions that we had was, how would you best advocate for yourself, even when you think you're not fully prepared for a potential new role in that context?
Yes, this is so pertinent because I'm actually in a new role, recently promoted, and in all honesty, throughout my career, I've really struggled with imposter syndrome. There's definitely been those moments, oh my God, they're gonna figure it out, I don't know what I'm doing. But then I look around and I realize, well, we're kind of all in the same boat. And just going through the process, being a little analytical and saying, even though I have this fear, the past has always shown me that it was not rational. Everything usually works out just fine. But it took a long time to get there, and it took a mentor actually telling me that. When I was saying, well, I'm afraid I don't think I can do this. I need you to come to this meeting with me. And she's like, tell me one time that you went and you failed. And I sat there for a while. I was like, okay, well, never. And she's like, well, why this time? Well, I don't know. I feel this way every time. So, just as a leader, using the facts, like even if it feels a little awkward, giving yourself that grace, talking about yourself and treating yourself the way you would your colleague that you cared about. Like, I hear this so often about women, like, we can stand up for anybody. Like, if you get in front of somebody on my team, like, I will take your head off. Like, and using some of that same, like, passion and, vigor towards myself, Finding an authentic way is sometimes a struggle, but it's absolutely worth it.
Thank you. Great answers. Okay, the next one, Sabrina, is for you, and you alluded to this as it related to your new role. What advice would you give attendees about promoting yourself?
Awesome. So I would say, be your biggest advocate. I remember when I first started my career 25 years ago, I did have mentors who helped me get through, and they did not look like me. But one did say, half of the time you're spending learning your job, and the other half of the time you're spending promoting yourself, building yourself. And so that's one of the things I did. I mean, I've been an analyst, portfolio manager, but I stepped outside of that. I got my Lean Six Sigma operational efficiency certification. I got designations. I raised my hand for certain projects. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got in the role, because before I started my position, I raised my hand to volunteer to do a panel, internal panel on the anniversary of the death of George Floyd, to talk about diversity in the investment management business, and we had 400 employees attend that. So just being bold, standing up for yourself, being your advocate, create your own opportunities, and I think people will notice. And establishing allies, I think we talked about that earlier, establishing allies who are willing to speak on your behalf when you're not present, I think is also important.
Awesome. Okay, and Heather, last but not least, I wanted to get your take on how you see effective leadership being different from a woman's perspective, sitting in your role.
Effective leadership. I kind of go back and forth with this. I'm not sure that effective leadership looks different from a women's perspective versus a man's perspective. I really like to think about it from a human perspective, which is even Sabrina, we have different perspectives, right? And we're both women, and our leadership styles can look very different. So I don't know that it's necessarily a female thing as much as it is who are you as a leader, and figuring out that there's one thing that I did learn, and I think that this was really came back full force for me when I was on maternity leave just a little while ago. It is as a leader, it does not matter what you do. It does not matter what decision you make. It does not matter what you say, how you say it. Someone's always going to take issue with it. Always. You will never, ever make everyone happy. And if that is your goal, that is not leadership. And so when you step into the room, you must know who you are and what you stand for and what you believe. And you must know where you will be able to compromise and where you are able to negotiate and where you will stand firm. You must be able to discern noise from the truth. And you must be able to make decisions that matter. And that's not a female thing, that's a leadership thing. And so I just really believe that the world would be better if we could train better leaders to be better centered as humans and then treat others as humans that have valid perspectives and beliefs and feelings and all of that.
Okay, well, great. Well, I realize that we have gone way beyond our time frame, and I apologize for keeping you all, but I felt like the conversation was so good that I didn't want to end it sooner. And it doesn't mean we don't want to answer any questions, but certainly understand if you need to leave and get home. But I would like to open it up for questions. Not sure how best to do that, but if you just want to raise your hand, or and if you need to leave, please feel free also to do that. Mark, you have a question?
Is it, do you go by Susie or Susan? I'm sorry.
Either, as
Either.
long as it's, in that vein and not the bad word.
Certainly your firm has a big platform, and you have a CEO that is quite deliberate about using that platform for positive social change. How have you seen that evolve? Where do you see that going in the next 5 to 10 years with some of the issues that we've talked about today?
Yeah, if you followed Larry over his career, at least in the beginning, I don't remember him being so vocal about, different things that were happening in the world. And I will say, the past few years have been hard for everybody. And one of the things that really kept me going at BlackRock was when Larry stood up and started talking about racial equity, when he started talking about the environment. And we might not all agree on all of those things, but those were things that I happened to personally align with. So it makes it a little easier when you can't find your work-life balance, but you're like, well, I'm at a firm where I agree with what this leader says. Now, I don't always agree with everything he says, that's an impossibility, but I do really respect that someone with such a large platform, the world's largest asset manager, he is thinking of societal issues, and it's not just, where do we make the next buck? What do we do? It really is a client-driven company. So I hope it will continue. He did say he wants to retire soon, So depending on who fills that seat, I hope they really follow, in his footsteps in that arena.
Any other questions before we wrap? I realize everybody's probably like, yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone on our panel, and I thought it was just a great conversation, and the honesty and forthrightness with which everyone responded was just fantastic. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope you can stick around and enjoy if we still have the bar open. I'm not sure. But anyways, thanks for coming, and good to see you soon.